What's up and welcome back to Interpreting the Stars, where today we're talking about yet another Disney Plus original film. It's the one and only Ivan. Starring primarily Bryan, Cranston, and Sam Rockwell, this fantasy film is actually inspired by a real-life story, and it's important to reiterate the fact that it's inspired, given the fact that animals don't actually talk in real life. But the film does get a lot of the major points right, so I have to at least give it props for that. But what about the film overall? I'll try to dial down on my magniloquence, and let's get cracking. This review is brought to you by the word of the day, magniloquent. Using high-flown or bombastic language. The one and only Ivan centers on a number of circus animals that perform in the middle of a shopping mall, but none of them really love the work that they do and clearly long for a life outside of shopping mall entertainment. Especially Ivan, a massive silverback gorilla that doesn't even have a special talent like the other animals do. He just growls a lot. That is, until a young girl presents him with paper and crayons, and the painter within the gorilla slowly steps out of the shadows to express his feelings in a much more universal language, art. One thing that I kept saying while watching this film is how cinematic it was. I've seen all but one Disney Plus original film at this point, and they all feel like Disney Channel films with maybe a slightly higher budget, but nothing that deserves to be in the theater. I actually think the one and only Ivan could have been in the theater. I don't think it would have done incredibly well, but I do think it would have fit a lot more than any of the other Disney Plus original films because the quality of the film is mostly top-notch. This movie had the best cast, the best graphics, and potentially the best story out of any of the previous films. With the casting, you're talking about Bryan Cranston, who is clearly a very talented actor, as is Sam Rockwell, both of which are at the forefront here. With the graphics, you're not just talking about a painting gorilla, which is great all on its own. You're talking also about the CGI itself for the animals, the animation of their movements, and making them speak in general. The story is also kind of moving, as it revolves around a theme of being stuck. The animals feel stuck in their cages at night, and Bryan Cranston's character often feels stuck with finances, even though he still sometimes finds the joy in the work that he does. All of this goes into the fact that the movie feels more cinematic than any of the others, but I think the narrative itself still lacks just like any of the previous films. What do I mean by that? I kept feeling as if the movie was changing gears. When it first started, I actually tweeted about this, saying that I was getting Wreck-It Ralph vibes because the gorilla is supposed to be perceived as this big scary beast, but in all actuality, he's a charming, soft, warm, gentle giant, and he wishes people would see him as such, which is exactly what Wreck-It Ralph is all about. And then it turns into Toy Story, when a new elephant comes into the circus family, and suddenly the elephant was the new main attraction, not the gorilla. So that's like the Buzz Lightyear envy thing. From there, it turns into Madagascar, where all the animals are trying to escape from captivity, and I honestly kind of scratched my head as to what the story was supposedly the most important out of the bunch. You would think it would ultimately be about escaping, but at the same time, Ivan and Bryan Cranston's character have a very special bond, so you also don't mind seeing Cranston play alongside these animals, even though his character is the only one keeping them in captivity. Does that technically make him the villain? He certainly doesn't feel like a villain. I don't know. All I know is that the intrinsic weight seemed to shift pretty dramatically depending on which act you are watching. Why get the envy at all about the elephant if you just want to leave anyway? I don't get that, I guess. Let's go ahead and look at the final score for a second, which mostly mimics two other Disney Plus original films almost to a T in every department. Those two movies are The Lady and the Tramp remake and the most recent film Magic Camp. My unbiased score is 72%, which basically means that they did a lot of decent things behind the scenes that sometimes impressed me, but because I felt like those gears kept changing, I couldn't give it much higher grade than that. My bias score is pretty similar at 70%, which means that I had a good enough time with it. I was entertained, but I was never really in the target audience for this film. So at the end of the day, when we average out the two scores, we come to a final rating of 71%, 71 out of 100 possible stars, the same score that I gave Magic Camp and Lady and the Tramp. Honestly, this score is kind of depressing to me because I really did feel like the film ultimately felt more cinematic than any of the others, but it was still a movie that I probably would have never watched independently if I didn't review movies. But if you've seen this film, I'd like to hear your thoughts about it on the comments down below. Is it the best of the Disney Plus original films, or is it somewhere in the middle? Which Disney Plus film do you actually think is the best of the best? As for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this review, because there are always more like it coming out each and every single day. Hit the subscribe button and bell to be notified when I come out with my next review. And until then, peace out.
Dave examines movies we just watch for fun. Davey is the expert. He is the #1 critic that I go to when I need a movie pick. Thanks for joining up with us. We think